Is that one, Nia? Okay, I'll get started. Uh, Wajaniwina, Hijanki, Shanahini Katagawina. Um,
Recording in
Hi,
progress.
everyone, all of my relatives, I welcome you. Um, my English name is Brenna Yellow Thunder, and I'm very excited to have you all here to join us for our webinar. Executive orders failed to trump our sovereignty. Indigenous leaders talk about the current administration. We're very excited to have you all here. And I would like to uh, take a second to talk to y'all about why we thought that talking and sharing and educating y'all about the executive orders is necessary. Um, so let me share my screen for a second. And okay, so I want to talk about what is an executive order. And you can see we have it listed there on the left. An executive order is a directive that holds the force of the law. They are dispensed, signed, and publicly registered by the President of the US government. It's a written directive that instructs federal agencies and officials on how to carry out their duties. So, what that means is that they're basically not the law, but they're written with the force of the law. So, what goes into an executive order isn't immediately the language that we have to be specifically um, combating, but rather the sentiment that it's conveying. So, when it comes to the legal authority, they're typically based on the powers granted to the president by the Constitution. And then when we're talking about enforcement, so what do these executive orders have to do with like the goings on in the federal government itself? Federal agencies and departments are responsible for carrying out the specific actions outlined in an EO. So while the EO itself might not be the thing that is going to lay down the law, the federal agencies will be looking to the language within the EOs to direct what they're going to be doing within their federal departments. So the limits of an EO are they technically can't override federal laws or infringe on powers that are granted to Congress. And because of that, so we get into like the checks and balances of it all. That means that Congress can refuse to provide funding for an executive order, which basically means that, if you don't have the money, then you can't complete the action. So that keeps the executive order from being implemented. But the courts can also review and potentially overturn executive orders if they're deemed unconstitutional or beyond the president's authority. Um, However, something that we have seen that is a kind of disturbing trend is that a current sitting president can overturn an existing executive order that was issued by a previous president, and they can revoke it. And that's one of the things that we see, even specifically within these executive orders that are around energy, that's declaring energy emergency, unleashing America's energy potential, and then unleashing Alaska's extraordinary resource potential as well. So, um, when it comes to our fight for Mother Earth, that all of these leaders are leading the fights in their communities, and that I am try to help uplift is they can really we can see them being used to roll back hard fought victories, things like saving bears' ears. Under the like with that one specifically, we can see that the withdrawal of guidance on the social cost of carbon under the executive 13990, that's what's happening. That's what president can do. He can go back and revoke that executive order. And um, we a lot of tribal communities fought super hard in order to get Bears Ears recognized as a national monument. So the fact that that's something that can be revoked is super, super concerning, because that's another thing that we are going to focus a little bit on, is the importance of these national monuments and national parks being utilized as a tool by tribes in order to protect some of our sacred lands. And then finally, how can we fight back? That's what this webinar is about, how we can use the executive orders as the heralds of doom that they are. Things like the reconciliation budget bill, which was passed in the House of Representatives. And when the Senate passes their version of this bill, the House agrees and passes it as well. This is what one of the upcoming fights that we're really, really concerned about, because this bill would do things like pave the way for the Lake Powell pipeline, exerting deadly amounts of pressure on the Colorado River. And considering that, especially for the Colorado River Indian tribes just passing their official recognition of the Colorado River as a living being, this could be super traumatic for the community and also just for the world overall once we start heading back into or continuing and multiplying this dangerous trend of commodifying our rivers and our waters. That's only going to put us as human beings, but also Mother Earth, on the brink of disaster and pushing us over the edge. So that's a little bit of a overview that I wanted to share. And now we will head into hearing from our speakers. And I would like to introduce our speakers very quickly before we get in. Or, you know what, actually, considering the time, maybe we're going to be sharing their bios into the chat, but I think it would be nice to hear from the speakers themselves so that they can have a chance to introduce themselves to you in their language. So we're going to jump ahead into question number one. And speakers, sorry to do the switch on you, but I would love if you would introduce yourselves. You can name your tribes, any clans, your community, where you come from, what you're doing to defend and fight for your community, and then we can answer these questions. So we'll start with question number one. How have these executive orders affected your community and your work? And I would like to call Wania Locke first to the stand.
Hamitakiapi, chante wastena pechus api, winia machiapi iamos latahemataha wakpala at kawati. My name is Winia. I come from Standing Rock, but I'm also Ishnabe and Ana Dene, along with Lakota Dakota. And what is community development. Community development key in the solution.
Wania, I think you're breaking up a little bit. Can you hear me, Wania?
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay,
we can
cool.
hear you now.
So I was saying the solution to the Trump administration that we're currently facing is community development. This is doing Ishnati Lowampi becoming a womanhood ceremony. These are the things that we provide on Standing Rock. To combine efforts through Standing Rock Grassroots and Movement Training Network, the Mini Wichoni Health Circle, and the Mini Wichoni Nakichi Uzay Won't Bay. These are the things that we're amplifying. We also currently got the SAGE program that's really amplifying indigenous energy and how do we produce energy indigenously and sustainably, and being really mindful about what kind of windmills are we buying, what kind of solar panels do we have, where are they harvesting from? So being really, really mindful in energy efficiency. The other program that we got that I really, really love is Woju. Woju's primary focus is Indigenous food sovereignty and sustainably harvesting buffalo and getting gardens out there. And that's one of the key things is like, can you feed the people? Can you feed the people? The second main thing is like, what is the water quality? Water quality, air quality, because you can't have a thriving community unless those basic human needs are met. And water, clean water and clean air, clean land, that's a human right. It's not a privilege. And that's one thing I want really, really clear. It's not a privilege to have any of those things. It's a human. Adding the Trump administration is community development and creating, um, amplifying youth voices, but also amplifying our language so that we're thinking with indigenous thoughts. And then, it all starts from birth. So as you guys know, in my bio, I'm an indigenous birth worker also. And that's where decolonization starts. When people talk about decolonization, what does that mean? And it starts at birth, from birth until the end of life. It's a whole cycle that we flow in and flow out of, just like water. And so, yeah, that's where we're currently at right now. Thank you, Brenna.
Yeah, Winia, thank you. See, we have a question in the chat. Thank you for putting that question in there. We will be going to questions at the end of this webinar. So I would like to pass it now to Crystal.
Mikudamin Kiyohe, Nahampi Pise, Mima Crystal, Mima Okanichi Saponi, Mima Mebin, Watiwa. So I just wanted to say that how these executive orders has really affected our community. One is they have really harmed not only our organization, but other organizations that we were supporting. So, as an Indigenous-led organization rooted in cultural revitalization, land stewardship, and intergenerational healing, we've just witnessed one, the dismantling of the Justice 40, the rollback of the environmental justice policies, and then the targeting of DEI frameworks. So let me see um some of the funders that we know have gotten pretty scared because of, all of the IRS talk or how they're going to start scrutinizing people. And it's not because our work has changed, it's because the political climate just has made supporting Indigenous justice riskier in the eyes of institutions. The one grant that we were a hub partner for was that Justice 40 Thrive Communities grant. And some of the programs that we had went out into the community to help people start their own project was one was teaching youth and elders to reconnect back to their their ways. So hunting, gathering, preparing traditional medicines, reclaiming indigenous food systems through gardens, not just our own in Seven Directions, but helping people start other gardens because we know we were going to have to start relying on each other as a community, but then also caring for the land and water, not just as stewards, but as relatives. So that deprioritization of Indigenous environmental leadership means fewer protections for our sacred sites. So most of these extractive industries are going through our sacred burial mountains. And then also there's a lot of now lithium mining in North Carolina, but right where we live, there was a moratorium lifted right across the border on uranium extractive development. And so now we're going to actually start seeing that. Another thing that has happened is talking about the DEI orders. It's just really affected our community here in North Carolina because when you take away these DEI initiatives, because most of our jobs are not federally recognized, we were relying on like women uh, grants. They were recognizing some of the state tribes, but also this minority perspective has left a lot of businesses not being able to compete with the majority white businesses that for contracts, for government contracts. And then these shifts are compounded by the administration's approach to tribal sovereignty. So rather than respecting tribes as co-equal sovereigns or policies increasingly treat tribal nations as subordinates. Um, so yeah, so we're facing a legal and political climate where treaty rights, land protections, equal and taxation authority are being interpreted through a narrow assimilation lens. And so yeah, that's where we are. But hey, we are here and we're still fighting and we're working on our ways. We're going to get through this and we're going to survive. So yeah. Thanks, Brenna.
Thanks, Crystal. Yeah, I love hearing everything that you're sharing as well. And I just want to uplift the amazing work that you did. I remember when we first spoke a few years ago, you talked about wanting to do a conference in your area that would help uplift Indigenous folks and educate them and bring them together. And I really want to applaud you for that because you just did your first regional conference a few months ago, and it was really awesome to see that growth. And that's the type of thing that is going to really help bolster in our fight to save our relationship with the land, our relatives, the sky and earth beings, is to do that type of investment, even during um, this administration when these executive orders are coming through. That doesn't stop any of our community leaders from, starting and leading these initiatives. So speaking of other community leaders, I would like to welcome my coworker, the amazing Missy Crow, to the stage to talk a little bit about her work and how these executive orders have been affecting it.
Sharon, I got Mary Kogan, Dr. Doan. Be real quick. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Crow. I'm a member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee from the Qualla boundary in Cherokee, North Carolina. I live within the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the Blue Ridge Parkway. These executive orders, as a federally recognized tribe, were under the Department of the Interior, which is under the Secretary of the Interior, right? And so when Burgum came in, the first thing Trump told him was to, go through all of the interior offices. You're talking about the Bureau of Land Management. You're talking about Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. You're looking at national parks. You're looking at federally recognized tribes. And so looking at how the executive orders hurt a lot of our funding, especially in health and education, right? Looking at how the DEI things were affecting us, where we were up in Washington, D.C. in February at the Gathering of Nations, National Congress of American Indian, reminding the Congress and the senators up on the Hill that, we are not DEI. We're political entities. We are sovereign. And a lot of times we get that word sovereignty mixed up with thinking that the United States is the one that grants us our sovereignty, and it's not. We had our sovereignty and they recognized that, thus came the treaties. And so when the treaties came, under their constitution, the treaties are the law of the land. And so now you're looking at how they're trying to just avert all of these structures of their government that had agreements with tribes, that they would provide certain things for everyone here. That we have to understand that these things are being twisted even by our own tribal governments. So in saying that, in 2022, well, you're looking at the executive order of Trump changing the names back to from taking away Denali, Mount Denali, turning it back to Mount McHenry, right? And then he goes on and changes the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. These are some of the things that we're seeing even here, whereas me and my Cherokee sister, Levita Hill, in 2022 took the initiative to restore Kawohe. Kawohe is the highest peak in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which was currently known as Clingman's Dome, named after a state senator during the Confederate War. And anyway, my sister and I worked for 2.5 years, going to city council meetings, county commissioner meetings, state legislators, talking to whomever and anyone that we could to garner that support. Because when we took on the initiative on how we do that, how do we restore Kawohe, and learning the federal laws, the offices that was made, U.S. Geographical Names Office, getting that application, knowing that it would take that work. Once we did the application, they would go around to the cities and the states and ask them if they are in support of that name change. So Levita and I took that initiative on our own. So for 2.5 years, we went and we garnered support from all the counties in Western North Carolina, state of North Carolina, as well as the state of Tennessee. Actually had legislation passed by the state house and signed by Governor Lee. That came on September 18th of 2024. We got the word from U.S. Geographical Names that our application was approved and Kawohi was restored, which was a big celebration within our community, not just here in Cherokee, North Carolina on the Qualla boundary, but also out west to our sister tribes, the Cherokee Nation, as well as the United Gadua Band. All of them call us here Mothertown. And so to be able to have that acknowledgement, when we talked to our communities, we kept telling them that there was always this threat by the United States government. They're going to do what they're going to do. They always have. But we didn't do it for them. We did it for us because, you know, when we're looking at how we were forced to assimilate and acculturate and was forced to try to forget our language, try to forget our traditional knowledge and our teachings, you know, that put a real big void within a lot of our people's souls, and a lot of our ancestors had to do that. My parents were boarding school survivors. I hate using that word survivor too. I want to start using the word thriver. They were boarding school thrivers. My father was able to maintain our language, which was able, now mind you, he didn't teach me fluently, but was able to teach me and show me that traditional knowledge of how we sustain ourselves in these mountains. You know, we still gather and we still hunt and we still fish and we still do the things that our relatives have been doing for forever. And so when we're looking at our Forest Service, even the executive orders of Trump pushing into to clear cutting, you know, we've been working hard to build that co-stewardship with the U.S. Forest Service, with the National Park Service, you know, even them supporting us in restoring Kawohi. You know, we've seen that great, you know, building that alliance, you know, with federal programs and stuff. Even though, you know, we're tribal communities, it was working. And of course, now you have this executive order to come in. But we have to remember, you know, this goes back to Standing Rock. You know, we were fighting all the way to December until President Barack Obama, you know, made the executive order not to that stopped energy transfer, right? But as soon as he, you know, went out of office and Trump came in January of that following year, what did he do? He rescinded that executive order. So, you know, as Native peoples, I hate to use this term, but it's the same shit, different day. You know, we've been having to deal with this since they arrived on our shores, and we're still here and we're still standing. And just like Brenna said, we've created this work to where that's why we're receiving the retaliation, is because we have been gaining that momentum. We've been gaining that understanding within our communities and building that. How do we bring back our language justice to our babies on up? How do we, you know, look at food sovereignty and teaching our children not only to garden, not only to gather, but more so, how do we teach them that spiritual connection that we have, taking away all of us that were forced into that religious sect of Christianity, right? And that's real too. We have to always understand that when you're looking at someone up there that's selling Bibles along with tennis shoes and basically just making money, you know, we know that spirituality part. But we also have prophets, and we also have teachers within our ancestors that told us these things were going to happen. And so one thing that I encourage our relatives, not just here within our Native communities, but all over the United States, is to understand that we have that power as human beings, as people, as voters. You know, we have to build that common ground. What's our common ground? Because we've seen so much divide. So with that, you know, I just want to thank you, Brenna, and everyone here for giving us that opportunity. You know, we're going to still see more of these coming within the next couple of, you know, months. And so, you know, just that we start educating our communities, educating our peoples to understand truly what it is that governs us, and then what it is that we can do to protect ourselves, to have equal, fair, and equal rights and protection. And I'll leave it at that. Check. Thank you.
Yeah, Yagi, Missy, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I just want to highlight that what she was talking about, our sovereignty and not needing to be recognized by the US government, is something that we really want to try and emphasize with a lot of the tribes that we work with, to let them know that regardless of what is happening with these executive orders, trying to keep an eye on them and how they're going to infringe on our sovereignty, that regardless of whether or not we are recognized by the US government, doesn't have an impact on the sovereignty, that relationship to the land that we have. If you can look at even my own tribe in Wisconsin, the Ho-Chunk Nation, that we didn't get our federal recognition until like 1967. And before that, we had originally been removed to Nebraska, but it was from our one of our previous chiefs, Chief Yellow Thunder, who kept going back to Wisconsin, back to our homelands, that we were able to keep that relationship with the land. We were able to keep our own languages, our own style of governance, of self-government governance in that community alive, to the point where in 1960s, or in the 60s, 100 years after Chief Yellow Thunder had left Nebraska and gone back to Wisconsin, we were able to gain that federal recognition. And those are some of the things that I think when we're looking at these executive orders, it's really, really important to remember that we're using those executive orders as tools to keep an eye on what else could be coming down the pipeline, so to speak, from the federal government. But that at the heart of the fight is the fact that we have that sovereign status that we recognize and that we practice within our own communities. So on that note, I am very excited to welcome to the stage our next speaker, Mr. Chuck Sam.
Thank you, Brenna. Nechleon and I'm Yuma, and Ashamanasha Shishkalashkrik, Iwa Kanishnak Niwit Luma, Tachamna Nihyawipum. Good day, my friends and relatives. My Indian name's Mockingbird with Big Heart, and I come from the place of the Big Springs on the Umatilla Indian Reservation, and I'm speaking to you from the homelands of the Cayuse today. I'm so very pleased to join you all. I had the distinct honor of serving in the Biden administration as the first American Indian as the National Park Service Director under the leadership of Secretary Deb Haaland. And, when I look back on my service there, I was very surprised to join the administration because I spent nearly 30 years throwing rocks at the Department of Interior. And to be asked on the inside was a huge surprise because I didn't know if they wanted me to actually break the windows from the inside now, because I've been trying to break them from the outside for 30 years. And a lot of that had to do around not just the laws that were perpetrated against us as Native people, but also those executive orders, because as Missy pointed out, it feels like we're a ping pong sometimes. They go back and forth. And so by example with that, President Trump has signed, as of today, 161 executive orders. In under 5 months, 161 executive orders. President Biden, in 4 years, signed 162 executive orders in 4 years. There's also a distinct difference. President Biden had a number of American Indians on his staff and throughout the administration. And he ensured that when he was writing an executive order, that we had input on those executive orders to talk about how that may or may not affect tribal people and tribal nations. And the executive orders were crafted in a way that recognized what those effects may or may not be and what those challenges would be legally to tribes, knowing in some cases that yes, tribes would have to sue us, but that was okay because we wanted to ensure that there would be paths for those mechanisms because those are the right mechanisms by which decisions are made between tribal nations. What I'm noticing in this 161 so far today is that there has been no rhyme or reason or discussion from a Native perspective whatsoever being introduced. Currently today, I serve at the pleasure of Governor Tina Kotek in the great state of Oregon. I serve on the Northwest Power and Conservation Council. This president has declared a national energy emergency. That is affecting all of us as a country, but more specifically the tribes all across the United States and my own home tribes here in the Pacific Northwest. What does that mean for us? And under that executive order, and there are a number of them that address everything from opening up nuclear energy to looking at how we are doing the electric grid to opening up public lands for sale and or energy and mineral resource development. Those are lands that are protected both under federal law and also under tribal stewardship and co-management agreements that have been set not only in the Biden administration, but have been written and inculcated in laws previous to that from previous Congresses, dating back in some cases over 150 years ago. These new executive orders, while they are not law, in court in order for them to necessarily be overturned to point out where they are incongruous with the law as it's stated from previous court cases and previous laws as set by acts of Congress. But until then, this administration's marching orders and the people that are responsible for carrying that out will carry out those executive orders because they have to. And we on the outside now are trying to figure out how we're going to combat those issues. So by example, when we're looking at public lands, whether that's in the Bureau of Land Management, the Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife lands, or the National Park System, the president is looking at opening up those lands for exploitation for energy and mineral development. Many of our energy and natural reserves are in those lands set aside, particularly in Alaska with our Alaska natives and friends and relatives up there, but also down here in the lower 48. We have a number of reserves in the Midwestern tribes, in the plains areas, and throughout the Pacific West and in California and Nevada. We have strong concerns that those lands also hold the bones of our ancestors and a number of our ancient artifacts in the way of our life cultures and our life ways, and that will disturb not only the grounds of those who came before us, but also will disturb our waterways, as we already know are fragile as it is. Because of climate change, we're living in drought, in a time of drought, whether it's the Colorado River, the Columbia River, the Missouri, or the Mississippi. Those major waterways we all depend on for our food sources and for our major water sources to drink. If we continue that exploitation without actually using the best science available, without using traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous ways of knowing, because we as Native people have lived on this land since time immemorial, but as we know, at least for 30,000 years. And in that time frame, we've seen at least 4 major climate change events. And each time we not only adapt, but as Missy says, we've thrived on this landscape. We didn't survive on this landscape. We thrived on this landscape. Without using that knowledge and bringing it to the forefront, we are only digging ourselves deeper and deeper into a future that could be dystopian and could be miserable for not just us as human beings, but also for our relatives and the flora and fauna. So when looking at these executive orders, all 161 of them, tribes are trying to dig out and figure out where they apply and how they apply to us. And it's very hard to figure that out. We have teams working around the clock. My own tribe, the Cayuse, Umatilla, and Walla Walla on the Umatilla Indian Reservation are trying to figure that out. Most recently, the president has announced that he is getting rid of the agreement that was made under the Biden administration for the Northwest tribes on restoring salmon, the Columbia Basin Restoration Initiative. That was made among the 6 sovereigns of the Umatilla, Nez Perce, Yakima, Warm Springs, the states of Oregon and Washington, and the federal government. It was $1 billion 10-year project to get us out of litigation, to ensure that we were not back fighting USB Oregon, USB Washington in court, working cooperatively to restore salmon, watershed health, wilderness health throughout the Pacific Northwest, while still being able to produce clean, good energy in the Pacific Northwest that supports everyone, including industry and commercial operations. But now this is going to be placed on its head, and we're trying to figure out what that's really going to mean. Honestly, what I believe it's going to mean is we're going to end up back in court again. And as we all know, when you go back to court, there are winners and losers in court. And so far, the tribes have won most of those cases, fortunately. But the real losers in this is going to be the flora and fauna and the waterways, unless we figure this out. Because as humans, we have never given up, at least those of us who have been here since time immemorial, our responsibility to be good stewards of these resources. That is the promise that we made, and it's a promise that we have to keep, whether you are federally recognized or not. Thank you, Brenna.
Thank you, Chuck. Yeah. When I saw that news, it made me feel it was like such an overwhelming feeling because these aren't my tribal homelands, but out here I've been welcomed by tribes in the area from Grand Ronde and Warm Springs so like openly and so warmly, and have been able to share meals with them, and the presence of the salmon in the culture and the language is so important. And so in seeing that, it really made me um fear for a lot of, the family and the community out here, because um when we're talking about this connection that we have to the land and being able to practice our food sovereignty and being able to continue our cultural ways, what we're really talking about is, at the heart of it, it's understanding that across the world, all of the land that Indigenous people have a connection to currently and are able to practice their connection with the land, that land contains 80% of the world's biodiversity. And what that means is that we're able to practice our ways of life, we're able to speak our language and able to be on the land in a way that creates that reciprocal relationship. So we're not extractive with the land, we're not taking more than we need, we're not putting the earth and therefore our communities and our own lives at risk. And so when we're thinking about things like fishing rights or um, sacred sites, these are the things that are coming under fire under these executive orders. I see that we have Winia had to leave early. She was out there in South Dakota practicing her food sovereignty and participating in what did she say? Buffalo
Low
butchering.
scraping,
Yes,
like
buffalo scraping. Yeah, so she's out there doing the work and took a moment to speak with us, and I really appreciate that. But while she's out there practicing, I would like to uplift something that the chairwoman of Standing Rock had shared, which was this National Historic Preservation Act that was named in the Declaring a National Energy Emergency Executive Order. And they put out on their website this National Historic Preservation Act that a lot of us are familiar with having to go through this specific branch of the federal government in order to protect some sacred sites that contain objects that shouldn't be disturbed. And it's so crazy to think about this. It's awful. It's literally a post-apocalyptic, but that we have, remains of our ancestors there that we say, please don't plow through like a cemetery to make money. And that's that's being ignored. That's being ignored with these executive orders and under this administration. And that's something that, especially at Standing Rock, the chairwoman really wanted to highlight, was like how those sites are sacred, how those cultural places and these cultural objects and our ancestors' remains need to be respected, and they won't be with these executive orders, and specifically with the declaring an energy emergency, the expedited processes in order to get these extractive projects approved and started are going to have such a adverse effect on our communities and on our lands and on our connections to those lands. So with that said, I would like to take us to our second question, which is there anything that our speakers would like to share with other tribal communities that are currently fighting infractions on their tribal sovereignty? Any words of wisdom, any advice or thoughts, or anything that you would like to share with others who are going through the same thing that you're going through? And we'll just start with Crystal.
Okay, Miku, thanks, Brenda. So I had thought about this, and I did want to say that most, not all tribal governments today mirror the structure of that United States colonial, government, by not by choice, but by design. And then these centuries of imposed colonial systems from the Indian Reorganization Act to federal recognition frameworks have attempted to overwrite traditional forms of leadership and community decision making and ceremonial governance. But we must remember these systems are not who we are. So, like my sister Mary said, um, we have to reclaim our original instructions, matriarchal governance, our council fires, and the ancestral knowledge systems that sustained our people for generations. Right now, in this political climate, we're living in a time where simply practicing our traditional ways, hunting, gathering medicines, teaching youth on the land, is an act of resistance. The more our governments mimic colonial frameworks, the more we risk. We must refuse to trade ceremony for bureaucracy, language for legalese, kinship for compliance. We must refuse to forget. This is the work of rematriation, not just returning land, but returning to a way of being that is rooted in relationship, reciprocity, and respect. Returning a way of governing that is accountable, not to colonial power, but to water, to the seeds, to the ancestors, and to our next generations. We were never meant to be copies of a broken system. We were meant to be sovereign in a way that the United States government will never understand because our sovereignty is spiritual, cultural, and eternal. And I always just want to say, don't forget who you are and don't let them make you forget. It's not a new moment. We have survived every generation of colonization by relying on our ancestral knowledge and our kinship networks. And we really have to build back that commitment between our communities, the commitment to the land and to one another. So, like Mary, whether you're defending sacred sites or you're challenging jurisdictional overreach or protecting your water or asserting your treaty rights, we see your struggle, as our own. Um, yeah, and you are the front line of a larger movement. Every stand you take strengthens the legal, cultural, and spiritual foundation for the next generation, and you don't have to do it alone. We really need to mobilize our allies, demand transparency, share stories, and document everything. So that is what I have been trying to think about, um, and saying that this struggle right now is a seed and it will grow when we plant it and nurture it in the right way. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you for those powerful words, Crystal. I'll pass it to Missy.
When we think about looking at Turtle Island and seeing the struggles of Native communities, especially right now, Oak Flats, having to, stand up and do everything in their power to protect that area. And then having to go through that roller coaster ride of emotion, right? Right now, they've got to stay. Don't know how long that's going to be, right? The appeals court upheld, giving them some time. They're still back there. How can we support Oak Flats? How can we, just like we did Standing Rock? These are some of the things that we've seen even at Standing Rock. We were in solidarity, we were in prayer, and we were being attacked. And then when they took the Greenpeace, one of the biggest environmental organizations to court, Energy Transfer did, within that, the people that they named had nothing to do with Greenpeace, but the indigenous relatives who came to support the Osheti Sakoan, right? They were naming everyone: Juanilla, Dallas Goldtooth, Tom Goldtooth, Joy Braun. These were relatives. It wasn't started by Greenpeace. It was started by our relatives at Standing Rock. But look at how they manipulated that. Look how easy it was for this major corporate Energy Transfer, right? That did all of the violations, that did all of these things that the indigenous people, look what they did to get around it. In that lawsuit, they deemed them environmental terrorist organizations. Then turned around and said, anyone that funds these organizations are funding terrorist organizations. Look how easy it was for this administration. You got to remember, Donald Trump has millions and billions, if not billions of dollars invested in energy transfer, in oil. Look what's happening overseas. Look how he's standing between these powers of Israel and Russia and Ukraine and Iran. Look what he's doing. Because he's only got one vested interest, and that's greed, profit, and money in this position. I was taught that evil always is conquered by good. That a lot of times our native people, especially our prophets, will tell us, don't let that fire go out. And I often wondered, what did they mean by that? And that's when we allow all that negative and stuff to absorb into our bodies, that our fire goes out. I was told to pray for them, to love them. We got to love them. We don't love what they're doing. There's a difference. I had to learn that because it helped me keep my peace. Because there was a lot of times that in the beginning, I was an angry native. I was an angry, radical native who was mad at everybody, and it didn't help. It didn't help. It didn't help at all, because they immediately would handcuff me, or they would immediately escort me out, or they, my mama always said that you can attract more bees with honey than you can with vinegar. Them old wives' tales that they used to tell, right? And so I had to learn that in our peace, in our teachings, we're told to hang on to this medicine. We're told to hang on to the good parts. Yeah, it's going to come. Yeah, anger is going to come, and it's okay for us to be angry. It's okay to be mad. It's not okay for us to act in that. I had to learn that. I had to learn that the hard way. Going back to my teachings of praying and washing my face, going to water, humbling myself. And my daughter came out crying the other night, my oldest daughter. What's happened in Palestine has really affected her, because she said, Mom, that's what happened to us. So my daughter came out and she said, Mom, there's this friend I've gotten on social media from there. And every day he goes out and he plants things. He makes things. Even though his world is bombing around him, he's singing his songs, and he's doing the same things that he would do every day. And she said, and I wonder how he does that. And I said, baby, he has peace, because he knows that Creator's in control. We don't know why these things are going on. We don't understand, but we have to understand who and what we are as human beings, in that connection that we have with Creator. To understand that, as long as we're doing Creator's work, and that's what I tell everybody, we're doing what even the good book said that we're supposed to do, is to right protect and watch over this dominion. Didn't say to dominate. Didn't say. And again, that's how they use the English words, and they twist them real easy and real quick against us. And so once we know these tricks, and once we understand these things, we'll learn that take that deep breath and let it go, and we're going to be okay. My mama said, if not here in the spirit world as the ancestor, we're in, because that's why we're here. Because our ancestors stood, our ancestors fought, our ancestors died, and no matter what they tried to do us, we're still here. And we still have that major impact. We even seen it in the election of 2020. Crystal and I worked with another organization and working in the 9 key swing states to get our indigenous communities to stand up. And guess what? They did. Mind you, got kicked around a little bit, but we did it, right? And so we were called something else on CNN. And so when we're looking at these things, the only thing that I can advise our communities out there is to maintain your peace, maintain that smile on your face, and know that what you're doing in protecting the water and protecting the land and protecting the air and protecting our flora and fauna, the wing, the four-legged, the two-legged, everything that's created right here. Creator's going to bless us. I am blessed. I'm blessed to be here with you today. To be within this panel with all these beautiful people to share this encouragement. Yeah, we've seen those struggles. Yeah, we've been through a lot more, but we know one day, just like Brother Chuck said, we're still going to keep going, and one day we'll all come together and we'll celebrate that. That's even in our teachings in our talk. So I was raised to be a cheerleader. I'm raised to be let's go, let's get in there, let's dig in our heels, let's put up our dukes and let's go. Because we got a lot of work to do. With that, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Missy. I appreciate that. Chuck?
They start with their young. Revolutions that I've ever seen happen among Native people always happen with their elders. So my advice to the young people out there is if you want to see real change and you want to know what you need to do, go and see and talk to your elders. Education truly is the weapon of choice that we need now, more than we need violence or civil military action. We need education. But you need that, as Crystal said earlier, you have to have that grounding. You have to have that understanding, as Missy points out, of knowing who you are, where you come from, to be able to have those fights. But you have to have that first of understanding grounding. When I went to college, I was going to college because I wanted to go to college and I wanted to get an international studies degree. I wanted to go back and continue my work in intelligence work. My grandfather sent his cronies to me in my college and said, "Why? What's that going to do for your people?" And then he said, "We don't want you to get an international degree. We want you to go get a business degree because we don't understand why they work on 30-day, quarter, and yearly spreadsheets. We need you to understand how they do business so that you can bring that home to us to help us better understand how we fight that." I said, "Okay, I'll switch my degree. Oh, by the way, we also want you to drop out of University of Oregon and we want you to go to a Lutheran college because somehow they bring their Judeo-Christian belief system into that." I'm not a Lutheran, but I went to a Lutheran college because my elders told me that would be best. Then at one point I said, "I want to go to law school." And they said, "If you go to law school, you're going to become a lawyer. If you become a lawyer, you become an officer of the court. Then you're pledge allegiance only to the officer of the court. Why don't you go and get a master's in law? That way you don't pledge allegiance to the court, but you go and learn about the law, understand the language that they're using, which is foreign to us, and bring that information back so that you can help us when we battle them." So I got a master's in legal studies, Indigenous peoples law, to understand how federal law and international law is used against Native people and Indigenous people. But I did that not based on my wants, based on my elders' wants. If you're going to be a good warrior, you're going to go out there and you're going to use education as a tool and as a weapon. You do it based on what your elders can help you. That's how revolutions happen within Indian country, and that's how you take the fight back out there. But then you have to do that with a strong grounding, which is why when I finished my time in service with the federal government, I came home right away. I'm back here among my people so that I can remember who I am. And when I was asked to speak at our longhouse the other day, as I told people, they were very nice and said, "The former director of the National Park Service," I reminded everyone, I'm still just Boogie. That's my nickname. I'm the son of Butch and Sarah Sams. I'm Ruby's dad, who was sitting in the stands. And I'm Core's brother because my sister's on the board of trustees. So you can call me Core's brother or Ruby's dad. But that's because we need to be humbled each time and remember where we come from, who we are, and what we're doing and what we're protecting. But education is a key in this battle, but it has to be from a grounded place of knowing who you are and where you come from and the responsibilities you have to be a good steward. And it has been an honor and a pleasure to be with you all today.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you to all of our panelists for your beautiful words, your wisdom. I'm so honored and grateful that you could all join us today to talk about this because it's been really weighing super heavy, I think, on a lot of our communities, and I know it's been weighing heavy on me. Um, so hearing y'all speak about the fights that you've done and what you're doing now and how we can move forward in a good way is really, it's healing. So I just want to say thank you, and Inigigi Akiahet, thank you so much. I know we said that we were going to do a Q&A session, but we're just at the end of the hour, and I want to make sure that our beautiful speakers who have been with us for an hour get a chance to, you know, go on their way. I know we have one question in the chat about how non-natives can help support this critical advocacy. But I would like to have us end on hearing these words from our Indigenous leaders, those who are in the communities fighting the good fight, and encourage y'all to join us for our next two webinars in the series that are going to look at the unleashing American energy, unleashing Alaska's extraordinary resource potential. And we can dive more into how these are affecting communities and hear from those community leaders as well. So thank you again. And thank you to all of our participants, all of y'all attendees who joined. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Brenna. Thank you for having us and for the webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have to jump to another meeting. I appreciate it. See you all soon.
Everybody have a good evening.
Bye.
Record.